The Twilight Garage podcast is brought to you by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Twilighters! I want to personally welcome you to this series without end. We're going to be covering Helter Skelter, the most famous true crime book of all times by Vincent Bugliosi and his wonderful ghostwriter, Kurt Gentry. There's so much to cover here. We're just going to keep it rocking. My great co-host, Casey Fields, and I. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Twilighters! Thanks for crawling out of the wreckage for episode 26. We've got a great guest who I'm going to introduce in 1 second. First, it is just so fine to see you on the Brothership Connection here, Mr. Casey Fields, the big case. He has been off just, I'm going to have to relate this bit of information because he's such a humble fellow. It's a very uncomfortable subject outside of the work he's actually doing, which is documenting something that is very near and dear to the hearts of Bay Area folks like myself, because there was a really scary string of child abductions, young girls that had been taken during this period of about 3 years. And Michaela Garrett was at the very heart of it. It just strikes fear. And he is covering the trial and writing a book on that. And that's all very adjacent to what we're doing here. Everyone we're going to be speaking with today has a book currently in the editing phase. Two of y'all have publishers. So we're not fucking around on here. We're very excited to have the most wonderful guest who I just have so much fun with, because I don't speak with Mr. James Dawson enough. Y'all might know him through the Manson Archive. Some of y'all know him simply as a Southern gentleman. Gentleman Jim Dawson is what we call him on here.
Yes, he is.
Because we love him. And man, I miss my folks so much. I was raised a good part of my life in the South. And there's a certain lilt to the way things are done. And James, we just love everything you bring to our program with your knowledge and your culture and your just wonderful goddamn personality. Without further ado, Twilighters, Mr. James Dawson, who we've got on here today. Now, what are we going to talk about today, James?
Pretty much whatever you want to talk about. Hello, everyone. Hi, David. Hi, Casey.
Our beautiful compatriot. The other thing with James, people always wonder, why do you have a South American potential despot in the making on your television program? Well, we like to point out that he's actually a wonderfully charitable, strong presence in his community that he's decided to make his own and embrace down there in Buenos Aires. And I think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. And if you all get a chance, do some research. We'll put some links up for you and see if you can support some of his efforts, which we're very...
Yeah, real quick. We weren't even planning on talking about that, but James, at some point we would love to help you do some kind of, fundraiser or something for the hospital that you're putting together down there. So James is working on getting a pediatrics clinic together, which is the only one within 45 miles, I believe.
Would not think in such an advanced city with such great knowledge and scientific awareness and education going on, that there would be a dearth of treatment for children's pediatrics. Like, are you what?
How's that all? How's that going, James?
It's not the only thing. I mean, it's all political. And there's the current president is also now trying to close mental health facilities that offer for public health care, for mental health awareness,
So, James, we've kind of gone hard on Officer Burbridge, the third officer on the scene. what were your feelings with how all that, the initial stages of officers were, arriving at the crime scene just prior to the media showing up? What's your take on all that?
Well, first and foremost, these officers, I'm not really going to shit on them, but at the same time, these officers have never dealt with something like that they were dealing with on these 2 nights. And even if we look at the Tate residence, there was so much wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're kicking the butt of the gun around, the grips.
Yes.
Nobody wanted. If you read the reports, nobody wanted to own up to. I mean, and I don't even understand where they were looking at the body. Like, for example, Sharon Tate, they're looking at the body, but in the report, she's wearing pants, but she wasn't wearing pants with the body. I mean, she was just laying there in bra, bikini, and
that's right.
So I mean, I don't want to shit on them, but at the same time, they were doing a shitty job.
Yeah.
And some of that we talk about too, where, in history, it's not forgivable, but maybe in the moment you think about how tired and overwhelmed they were. Hey, maybe somebody's going through a divorce. Maybe this is triggering war memories for somebody. Maybe these guys were Korean veterans. Like, who knows? But in the end, what fascinated me and made me go back over this much more thoroughly, the crime scene, James, was when you and George spoke on Goodbye Helter Skelter, the podcast, which we're hoping to see some more of, our dear friend George. You spoke in depth about the blood analysis, especially in regards to the blood on the front porch.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to get back into that because I'm not totally clear. And then what are your feelings on it based on, there wasn't enough analysis, but you've been around this case long enough. What are your feelings about the origins of that blood? Were the bodies moved? Is the crime accurately depicted in Helter Skelter, the murder? Or do you think the bodies were moved?
I don't believe the bodies were moved at all. And I'll tell you why. If we go, for example, let's say hypothetically that Manson did go back to the house and try to stage the scene, how would he try to connect? Why would he make a connection between Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring together, which is what Susan Atkins described that she saw? Why would he make that specific connection? If Manson went back and they were trying to remove the bodies and all of this, why didn't he get the gun grips that were broken
That's
off?
a great question. So yeah, for those of you that don't know, so Tex took the gun, smashed the gun, broke the grip off, took the gun with him, but left the remnant as part of this gun grip, which is made of what? Wood, or is that?
Yeah, it's a hard. They're generally maple, something like that. It's a really nice hardwood situation. The high standard, what they call the bunt line, which is, as you know, when you do your homework, is a 9 Longhorn 22 long rifle round. So it's a rim fire piece. He had a 9.5-inch barrel on it, so it gives it quite a bit of leverage. That's why, contrary to how you normally use a pistol, why he was bludgeoning people, it was a 9-shot revolver. He'd expended 5 rounds initially into Stephen Parent, as we all know. The other 2 rounds went into Jay.
Jay was shot once and Frykowski was shot once.
Right, exactly. So one went into
Stephen
Jay.
was shot 4 times. It only held 6 bullets. Stephen was shot 4 times. Sebring was shot once, and Frykowski was shot once.
No, well, it held 9, because what happened was
it held 9.
Yeah, how he knew it was no longer functional and the barrel was ruined was he'd hit Frykowski after. You're right, he shot him once. Thank you for that clarification. Shot him once because that's mentally. I don't know how I didn't
Yeah, what I believe happened with that is I'm not going to go into too much of the blood right now because you never know what's going to drop in the near future. I'll say that.
Oh,
Whoa,
whoa! Tease it, James.
Okay,
tease it.
Whoa. For our viewers, can we just throw a little air brake on right there? Viewers, our dear friend and sometimes partner of Billy Miltz himself, gentleman Jim Dawson of Buenos Aires, Argentina, has said, I'm not going to go into this blood evidence too much because you never know what's coming out in the future. Okay. We're just going to air tag this somewhere and we'll refer back to this in the future. We just want you historically here, home of reflections, to know that this is okay. You heard
coming soon.
Okay. Now go ahead, James. I'm sorry. I just had to.
And James, hold up real quick.
I will say it could be in the next week. It may just appear out of nowhere.
On this show.
What's that?
Well, can we announce it here next week?
I don't know when it's going to. I just know that it's being finished up to this weekend. And it will pop out.
We'll throw the link in the description.
We
next
invite,
episode.
And we're inviting you
when I know for sure it's going to pop up out of nowhere.
Right. And then we'll do the first
from somebody that nobody has heard from in a while. I'll say that.
Okay,
great.
So what I'm hoping for is we'll do the reaction interview here with you, and that'll be great. We're just wow, wonderful. Thank you so much. And this is what's making Twilight great for our viewers. It's all very spontaneous and very fun. I think the knowledge and us just volleying back and forth is great because this isn't for the amateur. This isn't for the uninitiated. We don't have a whole bunch of blood and gore splatter nastiness for you. But, okay, so what I like about what you're saying is about this crime scene, a lot of chaos, a lot of violence. So Texas is telling Susan, apparently, that the gun won't fire anymore because he broke it over Frykowski's head and the grip is now scattered. So the gun has become now an object of bludgeoning. That's it. And there's 2 live rounds remaining in that chamber when it was found by Stephen Weiss in their backyard there off of the main thoroughfare. So I find that very interesting, James. And I like what you're saying in terms of all the excitement that was happening at the crime, that I don't believe there's any way, shape, or form Charles Manson as a criminal would ever return to the crime scene.
No, I gotta be honest with you. Charles Manson was also, you might as well say, a pathological liar.
Sure.
He would say what somebody wanted to hear. For example, I know that when we were working on making Manson, he told someone that, yeah, I did burn down the school or the church, but then he told John Michael, that's what they wanted to hear, so that's what I told him.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the craziest thing about the way he does lie. It's a childlike thing.
So if someone is trying to say, well, Charlie told me this is how everything went down, how do you know that he's not? How do you know he's not lying?
Yeah.
That's
what
why
I do is, and I've found it to, if it lines up with the evidence, then it can be taken as truth. Like we know, for example, you've got Lynette's book around. We know that in Manson, in his own words, and that's another thing I would discuss at another point, that it's my theory of what may have happened. And Manson, in his own words,
by Newell Emmons.
Yes, Charlie says, Lynette talks him into staying, and Lynette verifies this in her book, so there has to be truth to it.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to properly research this, and that's the rule of thumb you're giving is a fine, simple illustration, and I recommend our viewers use that because I never had any interest in Charlie once he went to prison for that reason, because I had friends who would pen pal him when I was in high school, and I think some of them went out to visit later. I just thought it was weird and I didn't like it. And that's why I kind of got away from the whole Manson thing, because who was left, right? Well, people didn't keep track of anybody. It wasn't like I had any reason to go track Lynn down in West Virginia as a teenager and talk to her about something. My contact came much later, but I think these revelations, like you say, they need to be backed up. And I don't think they went back either. And I think the excitement of Susan leaving and knowing the knife was left behind and it not being retrieved illustrates that point.
Well, that's another thing too that you bring up, David. The case of that knife, we don't know. Watson had a knife because he admitted he cut Stephen Parent.
Right.
Patricia had a knife. Linda had a knife, and Susan had a knife. Susan allegedly lost her knife. Then there's a whole different story that it was Patricia that went and got the knife from Linda, or Susan that got the knife from Linda. You know, there's two conflicting stories there. But the regardless is that one particular knife that just came up missing, did she really give that to Charlie and say, I took her life for you?
So the knife that was found between the cushions of the couch, that was Linda's knife, correct?
It would have to be, because the description of it was very similar to a knife that Clem found that belonged to Linda, and it had that Eastern look to it. And he ended up giving it back to Linda.
Whereas
So
whereas Susan's knife is the one that she pulled. It was a throwing knife. It had electrical tape around the handle.
Right.
He pulled it out of a hay bale or something on the ranch. And that's the one that's missing, correct?
Correct. And that's the one she could have kept, because if you read it, she remembers, you know, if I use this knife, it's going to leave fingerprints on the tape. So that could very well be the knife she gave back to Manson and say, I took this life for you.
And now Tex was using a bayonet, right? And I believe that they did find that.
Knife. Yeah. Oh shit! Sorry, it was a pretty large knife.
I just love we're able to hang out like this due to technology, and like, you know, I was feeling some shit earlier. It's just like so human. This is awesome.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because they all came prepared with a knife on Friday night, whereas on Saturday night with the La Biancas, they didn't bring any knives with them. They used the knives that were in the La Bianca's kitchen.
And as a child, that scares the shit out of me.
It brings into question how many knives that they actually had there at the ranch. Because why would they not take a kill kit with them like they did on the first night?
Yeah, exactly.
Because technically that's what that was in the car when they went to the Polanski residence, was a kill kit.
Absolutely. And that's why this whole thing of the stickling point of people saying that Charlie was not involved in the administering of the evenings. Maybe he didn't make the plan, but he certainly refined it. And I like a theory that Casey had advanced, that he sent the D team. He sent the individuals he could expend. The
Expendables.
They were not his favorite folks. If they didn't come back, man, maybe that's for the better.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because at some point they all fucked him over and they owed him. So it was kind of a way like, fuck you, you know, you did this to me. You owe me this. Get out.
Well, and then the problem with that too is the rub on that is he said later, and again, we have to have, like you say, the 2 or 3 point confirmation on anything Charlie said in jail and on camera. But he said that the conspiracy to do that were, you know, red, gold, yellow, and blue. So those girls, it was their concept to do the love a brother thing, which that's still just, as much as we love that, I don't know. I have a problem with it. Now, James, what do What do you feel about this love a brother deal? That's such a hard one.
It was explained to me from somebody close that I would understand it better if I read John 13:15.
Okay.
Let me pull that up. And
Please do. Straight out of the New Testament.
Yeah, it's the one right before the.
It's John 15:13. Excuse me. And when I read that, it made so much sense to me. The whole thing. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay one's life down for one's friends.
Mm-hmm.
Things were getting pretty goddamn biblical out at the ranch. It's true.
Does that not make sense to you?
It totally makes sense. Yeah.
Someone very close to me told me that when I read that passage, it would all make sense.
And I still need to read Goodbye, Helter Skelter, which I know George touches on a lot of that. And I also have Susan Atkins' second book, Myth of Helter Skelter.
Which is the one that people say George based a lot of his book
They claim
on.
that George ripped it off, but no.
They can have agreement on these things, right?
Sure,
yeah.
There can be,
yeah.
You don't have to rip anybody off to be in the same trade. That's what I'm understanding. Like the gift that was given to me recently by Casey a couple months ago, James, was Garbage People, the updated version, and good night. There's a lot
of an updated version of that one.
That's a wonderful book. George's Goodbye, Helter Skelter. I think it opens up a lot of discussion. I think it's a wonderful piece. And I really am glad for it because I think it's changed media. I don't think there was a proper foothold for the logic of another form of discourse on this case.
I hope I'm not speaking out of school here, but George is in the process of coming out with a new edition. Is that right?
Really don't know, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see on that.
Because
I'm hoping that he does.
Well, this was the revised second edition.
Yeah.
That'd be very interesting.
I've got both versions, by the way.
Well,
the first edition and the second edition.
Of course you do. But I love the photographs. And what I'm hoping for is more of this type of stuff. I'm hoping that
that's the thing. When Billy Mance read Goodbye, Helter Skelter, he knew that he had to shape Making Manson around that.
I like that.
So Making Manson is kind of Billy's way of opening the door, because Billy gained a lot of respect for George. Was Billy's way of opening the door for somebody else to come in, pick up George's book, and carry on with the next chapter.
Well, I hope he uses more of George's interview that didn't make its way into making Manson.
Well, hold up just 1 second here, James. We had been speaking yesterday, Casey, about how we felt George didn't appear much, considering what you're saying now in Making Manson. His lack of physical screen time might be explained because the whole backbone from what James is saying was based on George's words. So they didn't need George's face because they used his entire structure and used, from what you're saying, our man, John Michael
Jones. Yep.
John Michael Jones's revelatory tapes as
back
the voice. Am I taking that correctly now?
The tapes back up the book.
So that's why perhaps George wasn't on camera as much as one might have thought. Okay,
For example, we got two Charlie tell. Now this can go both ways, but For example, we have Charlie telling two people that no, I did not go to Cielo Drive after the murders. But on the other, we've got two saying he did. But if we look at the evidence when it comes to him supposedly staging Cielo Drive after the murders, he did a very piss poor job.
Well, why would you go? The timing of it, you're just begging to fucking get caught. Like,
Exactly, because if you remember, and Casey, I know you'll remember this, when Patricia was arrested, she said she could never figure out how her pinky print got on the French doors going out to the swimming pool because she swore she never touched it.
Yeah.
So if they went there to stage something, there's always the chance that they've touched something that they didn't remember. Now, there were, I think it was 25 unidentified fingerprints that were found at the residence.
You're right. That's right.
25. If any of those 25 belonged to Manson or a accomplice like it's claimed, we would have known about it.
And I don't believe that they did their due diligence on figuring out those 20-something fingerprints, because I've never seen a list.
Some of them also believe, because there was the case about, there was also talking, I'll have to find the newspaper article, but there were glasses that were found in the sink, like martini glasses. Well, if you read Chapman's testimony, that's covered. That was from the lunch earlier that day.
Right. Because I've been reading a bit of Chapman's words, and the whole thing, like you brought up recently about the Muerte statement.
Yeah.
That was really, after
that blew me away, that in 2017, Burbridge was still talking the same old nonsense 50 years later about, I was leaning over Sharon. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and I was crying. And the maid, when I drove up, the maid couldn't speak English.
Running out there. It's like she's
she might not have been able to speak English because technically she was in shock.
Yeah. Oh my word. But yeah, that was really funny. A lot of these characters though keep reoccurring for us, and I feel that's why we keep coming back.
I heard at some point even the glasses that were found at the scene were kicked underneath the couch.
They didn't find them for 2.5 days.
And,
well, so that's the thing too, and George has said this publicly, that Charlie told Blue that he told Sandra to take those glasses. He told Patricia to take those glasses and dump them.
Right. And that's why I've always associated them with Blue.
Because she used to wear glasses
that were kind of horn rim and similar. They have that story of Charlie telling her, "Hey, babe, you don't need this, babe." Her shit canning the glasses. And then there's conversation happening. So I think there's a lot of what we do in regards to this case. I think a lot is we'll smash a lot of the information together because we get reading so quickly, because we are the competent stunt readers that we all become in the TLB realm. But I beseech all of you, slow down. And when you read these things and you read people's testimonies, remember to read them in their voice. Like when you go back through with your personal hard copy of Reflections available from Peace and All Press from Lynette Fromme, read it in her voice. Take your time, slow down. These are treats.
And pay a little extra money and get an autographed copy.
My goodness. I hear they're available at Twilight Garage on YouTube. If you DM the knucklehead who has that show, he's not worth a lot, but
not only would it be a nice blessing to throw Lynette's way, right, of this great book that she's written, but it'd be nice to get her a little bit of money.
Well, here's the thing. When you have something personal, which I'm not going to share with you because it's personal, it's very special. For me, this book is very well worn. You can see it has a curvature to it from the way I hold it. Every page is pretty much, it's like an old school Bible. Call the book Mama, because when I want to cross-reference something, I talk to Mama.
James, can you just share with the viewers a little bit more about your channel and not so much what you have coming up, but just for those that aren't familiar with the work that you've already done that's out there.
And what is existing, because if y'all go back to earlier posts and these different things we're talking about now, which James is going to elucidate y'all about, it is a wonderful, literal archive of just, I think, some of the best pulls of this whole thing, be they video, audio, or visual. It's just a wonderful, wonderful assortment you pulled together.
Well, currently in trying to get being able to pay a copyright fee